Welcome, beautiful people, to Camp Koji. My name is Joel. Thank you for joining me as I break down the biggest gaming news from the week that was on the only podcast you will ever need. On today's show, we're going to talk about some fresh Xbox layoffs, a walkout at Annapurna Interactive, and PS5 Pro's price problem. But first, we have to talk about Ubisoft. So Ubisoft's share price plunged again on Monday after a minority investor called on management to take the company private or let it be sold to a strategic investor. Ubisoft's stock price has fallen by more than 50% over the last 12 months. In the letter, the minority investor offered a few proposals. They claim what Ubisoft could do is take the company private, sell it to a strategic investor, replace Yves Guillemot as CEO. He also threatened to use French minority law to collect enough shareholders to start a proxy fight and initiate a sale process of Ubisoft to increase shareholder value for all shareholders. They also believe there should be a core reduction and staff optimization, focus on core IPs and management changes. So a lot going on here. Now, I don't remember exactly when it was that I released this video. I'll have to check on my YouTube, but I had released a video a few months ago talking about Ubisoft. It was called The Truth About Ubisoft, How They Destroyed Their Own Company. I was actually a year old by now. And I went back and I rewatched it. And I think a lot of the things I brought up a year ago sort of still apply to what's happening right now. When I made that video, it was at a point in time where Ubisoft's stock had already plummeted maybe like 35, 40% or something like that. And I was talking about what made the company successful in that video. And then I also talked about what led to its downfall. And I think primarily the main takeaway that I got while making that video is when you really think about Ubisoft's rise and fall, it really is one of those companies that you would be justified in squarely placing the blame on the leadership team. And look, let's be honest, that's something that you can make that claim for a lot of failing companies. But there are a lot of times that there are these other circumstances that can lead to a company just not doing well, whether it's competition, a change in consumer behavior, whatever, what have you. But this is one of those moments where you can clearly see that the main issue here was the Guillemot family. Pretty much the CEOs and the people running this company have made almost entirely wrong decisions for the last 7 years or so, especially when you look back at what made them successful. And I think, like I was bringing up the fact that, you know, their expansion of the Tom Clancy universe early on, latching on to some pretty big IPs, really discovering some key intellectual properties and then working really hard to expand them, whether that was Splinter Cell, whether it was Prince of Persia, whether it was Far Cry, Rainbow Six, Ghost Recon, all these great IP that they were able to create in-house or, you know, licensed through Tom Clancy. And then from there, build upon and just release great game after great game. And I was also talking about the fact that they were doing a lot of great work as a publisher, doing a lot of great work with developing and publishing movie tie-in games, which were really hot at that moment. They were really good at identifying trends before they happened. So they were there very early on with Nintendo when it came to the DS. They were there very early on with Nintendo when it came to the Nintendo Wii. And then you just start seeing all these issues happen around, I think, the Wii U era. And, you know, what was that, like 7 years ago or so, where the company just couldn't stop making mistakes. It just felt like they couldn't stop making mistakes. And I think Wii U was kind of the moment that, I'm not going to say the company peaked. I would have to like really dig into it to find out exactly what their peak would be. But I remember at that time they had released Rayman Legends. Child of Light was pretty hot at that moment too. They were sort of looking at smaller titles, like what was the name of that title where you played as like a yarn character, Unraveled or something like that, I think it was called. So they were really expanding their catalog. And then yeah, and then it just seemed like the company felt very comfortable and they said to themselves, okay, it looks like we built a few formulas out. Let's go ahead and just stick with this. It looks like this is working. Let's go ahead and just stick with it. And that was the major mistake that they made, right? Which was almost every game felt like a shade of the last one, open world, a bunch of crap on a map kind of thing, them thinking that that was really the wave, that's really where the industry was heading. Rainbow Six was probably one of their best calls in terms of, I think Rainbow Six Siege was the last time that Ubisoft saw things before they happened. Like they were kind of ahead of the curve with Rainbow Six Siege and live service and explosion of live service. And then you just started seeing the trend chasing, whether it was Hyperscape, whether it was what was the other one? X Defiant, which is already looking like it's not doing too good. I was reading a story that they were giving out like free in-game currency for just logging in. So when you see moves like that, where a company's just like, "Hey, here's free currency, so you can buy stuff instead of having to spend your money," that really smells of desperation. That means that there really are truly bleeding players. We talked about that, I think it was last week or the week before last, where Insider Gaming broke that story that they're struggling to maintain, I think it was 25 or to 30,000 players across all platforms simultaneously, which is pretty bad for a live service title. And that the team was kind of running out of time. Ubisoft was kind of telling them, like, look, you guys have to turn this around or we're going to be forced to make decisions, which probably would be another Hyperscape, leading to them kind of shutting it down. I remember the Rainbow Six Quarantine game. There were just so many decisions that they were making. They just felt like what was happening. And then you look at a franchise like Far Cry, where every game is the same, but it almost feels like an asset swap. Like you have a new villain, you have a new world, but the base of the game is almost identical to one another. Each Far Cry to me feels like a mod of the last one. There's really not much innovation going on there. They decided to put all their eggs into the Assassin's Creed basket. When they made that announcement of like 6 Assassin's Creed game, Assassin's Creed Infinity, all this stuff, I immediately said this is a mistake. And I feel like it is going to be a mistake. Obviously we'll have to wait and see, but I don't think that that's the answer. I think Ubisoft is, instead of trying to look ahead at, well, what does our industry look like in the next 5 years? They're looking backwards and saying, well, what is kind of like the guaranteed releases that have been bringing us money? And it was Assassin's Creed, so they decided to invest a bunch into it. And I don't really think that was the way to go. They've canceled a few mobile titles. Division Heartlands was canceled, which I think was a mistake. I don't know exactly what happened there, but I think that game would have been a success. Rainbow Six Siege, I think, is still happening for mobile. Not really sure exactly what's going on there. And then they had all these other projects that they had canceled. One that was like very Fortnite-like or something like that. And yeah, I mean, you can just clearly tell that the company is just completely lost. Beyond Good and Evil 2 has been in development for like 10 years. At this point, it's like, who cares about that game? Like literally, like who cares? It's an IP that does not need to be revived. It's one of those things that when you look at Beyond Good and Evil 2, everything that they talked about, what that game is supposed to be, it just is nothing like the original. So it's one of those things where, why don't you just craft a new IP at this point? I mean, who knows what's happening with that game? So a lot of the things that this minority investor is bringing is talking about is 100% correct. Like, this company absolutely needs a change at the helm. And the thing about it is, the Guillemot family, you're gonna have, it's like over my dead body, you'll take over this company. That's really how iron fisted they are with this company. There's also this sort of theory that's being thrown around by some investors that Tencent and the Guillemot family are, in a sense, devaluing the company in order to kind of perform a takeover and gain majority shares of the company in order to gain complete control of Ubisoft. I'm definitely not a stock expert. I can't really say exactly if that's what's happening. It sort of looks like it, but I can't really say that much. Now, in terms of starting a proxy fight, that's kind of exactly what a proxy fight would be. It's shareholders coming together in order to sort of gain control of the decisions of the company, because they are able to prove that the company is just not being run with the shareholders' interest in mind, or the future of the company in mind. Now, Tencent owns 9.7% of the company, and the Guillemot family owns 13%, in which Tencent owns 49.9% of Guillemot Brothers' leadership. That's the company that holds part of their ownership. So Tencent owns sort of multiple shares of the company outside of their 9.7%. And, obviously now there are a lot of conversations about what happens at Ubisoft. Will they sell at this point? Are they going to take the company private? I mean, I don't know. I think Yves Guillemot has in the past brought up the conversation about selling the company. I'll tell you right now, if Ubisoft sells, it's selling to Tencent. I think that's what would happen. I don't think this is a situation where, Sony and Microsoft would step in. I think Tencent would sort of continue assuming control of the company, since they already have a stake in it. I can see Tencent sort of being interested in sort of scooping everything up. There is a lot of value at Ubisoft. I also think that there is value at taking the company back private, personally, in order to take a step back and re-strategize the company's future, because right now nothing is really working. Star Wars Outlaw was something that probably was very expensive to build, and that's outside of just the cost of the Star Wars license, right? You have to give Disney a percentage, and Disney is not a cheap date. We've seen some of the percentages they take from PlayStation and Marvel Spider-Man. It's not cheap to get a license from Disney. So I doubt that Star Wars Outlaw has made its money back at this point. It did kind of look like an expensive endeavor. And yeah, it just really seems like they can't do anything right. And I think Star Wars Outlaws is a reflection of that. When you think about Star Wars Outlaws, it really feels like a lot of the games that are built at Ubisoft really start with either A, is this a trend? Is this what's hot right now? Can we hop on this trend? Or B, okay, cool, we're going to make a game. It has to be open world. And it kind of like open world sort of starts as the framework for a lot of everything that Ubisoft builds. And I just feel like it's just not the right direction to take a lot of things. And, there's so many games and experiences that would do so well right now that they've just kind of put in the back burner, And it's funny because when you think about one of their recent successes, it was this moment where they went outside of the norm of what's hot, which was Prince of Persia Lost Crown, which was taking an intellectual property that has been kind of sitting dormant for quite some time, and not completely reimagining it, because I think Prince of Persia, for a lot of people, they think about the 2D side-scrolling games, but giving it that Metroidvania angle. It was a critical success. I'm not sure how commercially successful it was, but when it comes to a lot of the things that they've been doing over there, that was one of those games that was, in a sense, innovative when reflected upon everything else they've been doing. And then you think about all these other IP that they have, like Ghost Recon, where they, talked about an attempt to make that battle royale. And a tactical Ghost Recon would do really, really well right now, especially if you had multiplayer added into it. A Splinter Cell would do really, really well right now, because there really are no other stealth titles out there. And, for whatever reason, I think that Ubisoft is putting the carriage before the horse, trying to chase profits. And that's really what has been their downfall as a company. They have essentially lost their way. And it's interesting because in that video that I made, I had brought up how EA was doing that for quite some time. But EA has sort of done a better job in the last few years of trying to find, more innovative games to put beside a lot of their big releases for the year, whether it's their Maddens or whatever. So yeah, I mean, we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens with this company. Next story, we have some fresh Xbox layoffs. Last week, Microsoft announced it was cutting another 650 staff from its gaming teams, mostly corporate and supporting functions, to organize their business for long-term success. More than 2,500 jobs have been cut since Microsoft's $69 billion acquisition of Activision Blizzard, which I think is more than that. I think it ballooned to over $70 billion once the acquisition was all said and done. This is one of those things that we knew was going to happen. This is a natural process of taking over a company. Part of that process is auditing every single section of this company and finding redundancies, finding jobs that are being done by two people that can be done by one. And that's really what a lot of these layoffs can come down to. 650 is a crazy large number once you really think about it. It's kind of insane. So hopefully a lot of those people will find another job soon. So yeah, this is just a result of this acquisition. It's a natural part of that process, unfortunately. And this is one of the reasons why a lot of people were saying that this probably should not have taken place. Microsoft should not have been allowed to buy this company. I'm going to tell you right now, Activision Blizzard would have suffered layoffs, I think, without Xbox picking them up. I think there still would have been layoffs on there. Of course, an argument could be made about the number of them. Maybe there are more because of this Xbox takeover. But I think we still would have seen layoffs. I don't think that this, Activision remaining independent from Xbox would have saved any of those employees from losing their jobs. I think they definitely 100% would have still have seen layoffs. In other Xbox news, they officially released the Game Pass standard tier, which is $14.99 a month, but does not include day one games, EA Play Library, or cloud streaming. But fans were quick to notice how many games were actually missing. A Reddit user created a list of 41 missing games from the standard edition that include Age of Mythology Retold Standard, Another Crab's Treasure, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, Diablo 4, Flintlock Siege of Dawn, Forza Motorsport, Humanity, Kunitsugami Path of the Goddess, MLB The Show 24, Neon White, Octopath Traveler 2, Open Roads, Payday 3, Hellblade 2, Slime Rancher 2, Starfield, Still Wakes the Deep, Chia, The Case of the Golden Idol, Turnip Boy Robs a Bank. This is interesting because I actually brought this up months ago. I believe it was around June or July when they announced that Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 was coming to Game Pass. And there were sort of already rumors about Standard being introduced. And when Xbox published a blog post, they specifically wrote in the blog post, Modern Warfare 3 coming to Game Pass, PC, and Ultimate. I can't remember what other. I think they put Game Pass Console, Ultimate, PC, or something like that. But they sort of listed them out. And I said, this is kind of weird. Why wouldn't they just say coming to Game Pass? And yes, Standard wasn't confirmed 100% at that time. It was just sort of rumored because it wasn't fully implemented yet. But it doesn't make any sense why, when they wrote this out, they wouldn't just say Game Pass. For me, it just felt like they were future-proofing that article for when Standard was finally out. And I made a tweet that, hey, this probably means that it's not just day one games, it's also day one editions of even older titles like Modern Warfare 3. And it looks like I was 100% right because Modern Warfare 3 was not on here. So I was able to catch that a little bit early. It's just interesting because when there was kind of that, I don't remember who put it together, but there was like that FTC complaint about, Game Pass Standard and post acquisition of Activision Blizzard, Xbox basically devaluing Game Pass with Standard being introduced and then the price going up, and then Xbox defending it, saying, well, it's actually not devaluing it because with standard, you now also have online play, for example, and blah, 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 whatever. We're giving consumers more choice. But essentially, the price, the cheapest access price of Game Pass on a console has gone up, right? Instead of paying, what was it, $11 for console, the cheapest option is now $15. So the price went up. The only thing that was added to it that you didn't used to have is online play. But at the same time, a bunch of these games have been removed, which is kind of funny because a lot of these actually play really well online. Like Modern Warfare 3, Diablo 4, Payday 3 on here, MLB The Show 24. So it's interesting to say the least, but I think it's yet another attempt of Xbox introducing this as a bridge to get people to just sign up for Ultimate. Like, I think that this is definitely a play that a lot of us saw coming from a mile away, where you introduce something at 15 and you tell the consumer, yeah, but for just $5 more, just $5 more per month, right? That's a cup of a Starbucks coffee, pretty much at this point in time. That's one double cheeseburger at McDonald's a month, right? You'll get access to day one games. You'll get access to the full library. You'll get access to EA Play, cloud streaming. That's really the play here, right? Let's kind of all be honest with each other. That's essentially what they did, is to introduce something. And there's a term for this type of, I want to call it consumer trick, but sort of a sales trick. Apple employs it a lot, where they'll do that with iPads, where they'll price apart. They'll introduce like different, what do you call it? Like drive tiers, storage tiers, 256, 512, 1 terabyte. And they'll price them like the lowest and the highest $200 apart to sort of tell consumers, like, look, just for $200 more, you can quadruple the amount of storage that you can get on one of these devices. That's sort of what's happening here. It's a sort of a bridge to get more people just to sign up for Ultimate instead of signing up for Standard. To me, I don't understand the value of Standard. I will say the same thing, which is like, yeah, you might, at that point, you might as well just sign up for Ultimate at that point, right? If you're going to go ahead and just do this, especially because you have access to so many more games by doing Ultimate over doing the Standard tier. Our next story is all about Annapurna. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about this, just kind of reporting it, not really much more to add to it. But according to an article from Bloomberg, Annapurna Interactive President Nathan Gary and his team resigned following a dispute with the group's owner, Megan Ellison, following discussions to spin the video game publishing arm out into an independent entity, of which Ellison pulled out. 24 members of staff all resigned from the company. Quote, all 25 members of the Annapurna Interactive team collectively resigned. This was one of the hardest decisions we have ever had to make, and we did not take this action lightly. Now, there are a lot of games upcoming, like Mixtape, or even like Remedy sort of put out a little bit of a statement talking about Control 2. A few weeks ago, we found out that Annapurna was helping fund Control 2. A lot of these companies are claiming that they're not really going to be overtly affected by what is happening right now, that the most important thing from Annapurna is just to support these publishers. I mean, who knows what's going to happen with these 25 members? This sort of feels like something where the leader of this group, Nathan Gary, is probably going to seek to start their own thing and hopefully employ these 25 people. We'll obviously have to wait and see. He'll have to secure funding in some way, shape, or form. But yeah, this is kind of insane. And just as a reminder, this is a publishing group. This is not a development group. But obviously, Annapurna had slowly become one of the most iconic publishers in our industry. They're sort of our industry's A24. A24 is films Annapurna, because I feel like A24 came out after. It's sort of one of those things where you see that Annapurna stamp, you're in for like a very unique narrative style type of video game. So they sort of have carved their own path within our industry. So hopefully all those 25 members find something really, really soon. And for our final story, we're going to talk all about PlayStation 5 Pro. So in an almost 10-minute technical presentation from lead architect Mark Cerny, PlayStation finally unveiled the PS5 Pro. So the main upgrades come down to what they claim are 3 pillars. So we have the upgraded GPU. The GPU has 67 more compute units than the current PS5 console and 28% faster memory. This enables up to 45% faster rendering for gameplay. Advanced ray tracing, more dynamic reflection and refraction of light. This allows the rays to be cast at double and at times triple the speeds of the current PS5 console. And finally, AI-driven upscaling called PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, which they shortened to PSSR, and everyone's calling PISSR. An AI-driven upscaling that uses a machine learning-based technology to provide super sharp image clarity by adding an extraordinary amount of detail. Now, this has been the upgrade that people have been talking about the most for this console. Has been rumored for quite some time that they were working on sort of their own DLSS NVIDIA type of technology. Now, what's interesting about this is that this doesn't exist anywhere. It's something that's custom built for the PS5 Pro. They worked alongside AMD to develop it, and it is a technology that AMD themselves don't have in their graphics cards. And for quite some time, AMD has been falling behind NVIDIA in terms of this type of upscaling technology. DLSS performs much better than AMD's FSR technology. It is a hardware-based upscaler, and this is something that AMD doesn't have. So it's really interesting to see them working alongside Sony to build this, and theoretically, this probably means that this will be a part of AMD's graphics cards going forward, probably starting next year. They'll have a more competitive solution to what NVIDIA has been able to do with DLSS. Alongside all this, it also includes what's called PS5 Pro Game Boost, which can apply to more than 8,500 backwards compatible PS4 games playable on PS5 Pro. This feature may stabilize or improve the performance of supported PS4 and PS5 games. Enhanced image quality for PS4 games is also available to improve the resolution on select PS4 games. It launches with the latest wireless technology, Wi-Fi 7, in territories that support the standard. VRR and 8K gaming are also supported. This is really interesting because for those that forgot, when the PlayStation 5 first shipped, there wasn't a logo on the box for 8K, but only one game had an 8K mode, and I believe it was called The Tourist, which was a phenomenal game, if you've never heard of it. Really, really fun game. So at some point, PlayStation removed the 8K logo when they reintroduced the system, the slimmer model, the one with the detachable disk drive. The box does not have an 8K logo anymore. So it's kind of interesting that now they're saying, wait, actually, hold on, guys, we actually could do 8K. And they have confirmed that Gran Turismo 7 has an 8K mode, but so far that's the only game confirmed to have an 8K mode. Current games that are patched to take advantage of PS5 Pro features will be marked with a PS5 Pro Enhanced label. Sony claims around 50 games will be enhanced when the system launches in November. That includes Alan Wake 2, Assassin's Creed Shadows, Demon's Souls, Dragon's Dogma 2, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Gran Turismo 7, Hogwarts Legacy, Horizon Forbidden West, Marvel Spider-Man 2, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, The Crew Motorsport, The First Descendant, and The Last of Us Part 2 Remastered. Now, it's really interesting in terms of what that PS5 Pro Enhanced label means. It doesn't mean that the game is guaranteed to run at 60 frames per second. It just means that it takes advantage of PS5 Pro features. So if it takes advantage of PISSR, you get the label. If it takes advantage of advanced ray tracing, even though it's 30 FPS, you get the label. So what Mark Cerny was talking about is that this can introduce more modes to PlayStation 5 Pro. So right now we're currently used to performance mode or quality mode. They're saying that this can introduce even more modes for companies to take advantage of, where I guess the baseline upgrade that I think a lot of fans are going to be expecting is going to be quality mode, but running at 60 frames per second, which is something that's not currently possible on the PlayStation 5. You usually pick between quality or performance. The system ships with a 2 terabyte SSD drive, will be available November 7th of this year. Pre-orders start September 26th, $699.99. So that was the price that sent a shock down people's spines, especially because it is digital only, and it also does not include a vertical stand. So the disk drive is $80. The vertical stand, I believe, is $30. So that means, I remember I did the math for us here in New York in terms of what it would cost after taxes. And if I wanted a physical edition of this console, it would be over $850 after taxes, which is kind of insane when you think about it. But yeah, so let's just dive right into it in terms of the price point itself. I am not surprised by the price point. I think when there were rumors about the PlayStation 5 Pro, at one point I had thought about like, okay, this would probably be introduced at $600. What changed my perception was when the price of the PlayStation 5 went up. When they redesigned the PlayStation 5 and reintroduced it, and then the digital edition went up by $50, I said, yeah, there's no way this console is going to be $600 anymore. Then it probably is possible now that this is going to be $700 at a minimum, when a lot of people started talking about the possibility of this being $700 at digital only. I personally am okay with the system shipping digital only. I think that for a lot of people that want to do physical, you know, it wouldn't be that hard just to also add a disk drive into your cart at the same exact time. Right now, disk drives add-ons are sold out. A lot of people thought that was indicative of like, wow, PS5 Pro is actually going to be a success. No, it's just scalpers and resellers seeking opportunity. You know, I'm sure a lot of them are going to attempt to pre-order and bot the PlayStation 5 Pro when it first goes up for $700. But there's a lot less risk with buying an $80 item and sitting on it and hoping to control the market, especially for the holidays. Because you're talking about an accessory that isn't just for PlayStation 5 Pro, it's also for PlayStation 5 Digital. So that's really the reason why you've been seeing it sell out. Insider Gaming has claimed to have spoken to someone within Sony that told them that it's not a worry. PlayStation is not worried about supply for the rest of the year when the system comes out. So even though it's temporarily sold out now, that consumers shouldn't have to worry about it for the future. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see about the reality of that. But yeah, so a lot of people were blown away by the $700 price point. And look, let's be honest. The reason why a lot of people are blown away by it is the fact that when you look at this presentation and they show what the PlayStation 5 Pro is capable of, it just doesn't seem like something that's worth $700. For me personally, if I were to sell my current PlayStation 5 at $400, right now GameStop is running a bit of a promotion where they're giving people $410 credit for a PlayStation 5 to put towards a Pro. That would still, if I wanted a physical edition of this console, I'm still, looking at paying $400. I'm simply just not going to do that. And when you look at the advantages of the PlayStation 5 Pro versus the regular PlayStation 5, for me, they're just not enough. It's something where it's like, yes, it would be very nice to have, right? If someone gave me a PlayStation 5 Pro, I wouldn't say no. I'd happily hook it up and play games on it. But for me, it's not worth a $700 price tag for me to get sharper details for things that probably wouldn't really even be that noticeable unless I was standing still in a video game. And that's really what this is sort of about. And I think a lot of people that are struggling with the price are current PlayStation 5 owners. They're people that that currently have one and are sort of looking at this from the lens of this isn't worth the upgrade. And you're right, but it's also indicative of the fact that this isn't really for you. The only people that are going to go through the upgrade process are a really, really core audience that PlayStation knows are going to go through the upgrade process. These are the people that bought the Portal, that own the headset, that own absolutely everything and anything that PlayStation puts out because it is PlayStation. They definitely have that type of fan base, and they have enough of an interest in a product like this where I think that we will eventually reach probably a point where it's like 1 in every 5 owners probably has a PlayStation 5 Pro. Analysts are claiming that they think it's going to sell 13 million. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see exactly what that number is, but I don't think that this is going to be a product that is going to 100% sit on the shelf. PlayStation also has access to enough data to understand what their manufacturing numbers should look like in order to meet the demand that they expect. And PlayStation does not expect this thing to be flying off the shelves. They don't expect every single PlayStation owner to be upgrading. That's just not realistic. And, when you look at the price point, this is definitely luxury on top of luxury. Like we kind of have to be honest with ourselves as gamers. PlayStation 5, and by extension, even Xbox Series X, but it's a little bit different for Xbox because at least you have access to the Series S. This is becoming a luxury hobby when you think about the price of video games and being a PlayStation 5 owner, where the cheapest one is $450. That's not cheap to begin with, and that's without any games. And when you think about entering this ecosystem at $450 or even entering at $700, then you're talking about $70 video games, and the rarity of encountering a sale for a video game when you're working through something that is essentially digital only. It sort of brings across a lot of conversations about, are people just being priced out of this hobby at this point, when it comes to this. And I think a lot of people are now having a fear of what does this mean for PlayStation 6, right? This to me now means that the possibility of PlayStation 6 launching at $600 is no longer impossible. I think at one point we would have deemed it impossible when we saw what happened with PlayStation 3 and it having that $600 price point. When we look at Xbox One and it being priced $100 over their competitor, at this point in time, it sort of makes you question, what would the price of PlayStation 6 be then? And I think that if this is successful enough, it gives PlayStation a little bit more data in order to think about, okay, maybe we could get away with PlayStation 6 being $600 with the disc drive, and maybe $500 would be the digital edition. We'll obviously have to wait and see what happens there. But I think that is one of the benefits for PlayStation with releasing this console, is you get to sort of check out the temperature of how does the market react to a $700 digital gaming console. It's going to be a lot of great data for them. I think that one other positive with this is PSSR. This is a new technology. It's going to be something new in terms of a lot of companies' workflows. They might be used to it on PC because of DLSS and FSR and things like that. But AI and machine learning upscaling is something that's brand new to video games. We've never seen this before. So I think that's another good positive of the PS5 Pro, is to get these companies used to adding that to their workflow, because it will definitely be a part of PlayStation 6. This is definitely something that Xbox is probably also looking into, maybe even also working with AMD for a similar type of technology for their future consoles. So I think this is something that will now become a staple and a part of gaming, because it allows companies to do so much with, not so little, but so much with the same type of hardware that we've seen traditionally in terms of graphics, in terms of GPUs. So I think that there are a lot of positives from PlayStation's perspective of pricing this as $6.99 and putting it out there on the market. I think that this is a product that, I had put out a YouTube video talking about this, where every market has sort of their luxury tiers, no matter what it is, whether it's cars, it's sneakers, clothing, jewelry. There are always tiers to it, right? Here in New York, you can go to H&M and get a really nice $30 button-up. And then on that same Fifth Avenue, you walk 3 blocks and a button-up shirt is $3,000, right? It doesn't mean... It's just like a waste of time and energy to stand in front of the Gucci store and complain about the prices, right? It just means that that's not for you. And not even to say that means you're broke. It just means that frugally, budget-wise, it just doesn't make sense within your budget. To me, if you're struggling to buy a PS5 Pro, this is not for you. If you're the type of person that, if you got hacked right now and $700 was missing from your accounts, how long would that hurt? If it would hurt for more than a few hours, then you can't afford this. That's how I essentially look at it. I do believe that, if you can't buy something twice, then that means you can't afford it. If you can't afford a $1,400 purchase without it hurting, that means you can't afford the PlayStation 5 Pro and you shouldn't get it. But a lot of people that can't technically afford it are going to go ahead and buy it because that's just the nature of being a consumer in the year 2024, right? I think that if you're a person that thinks that this is too expensive, you're right. If you're a person that looks at this and goes, "Yep, that's about the right price, I'll buy it," you're also correct. Both people are correct. I think the difference here, and it's something that I talked about a bit on that video, is that the people who don't buy it will still be affected by the decision of people who do buy it. And this has become sort of the aftermath of the pursuit of profit in video games right now. The aftermath of shareholder value is that when these companies start to pursue whales, when they start to pursue larger wallets, when they start to pursue larger household incomes, then the future decisions that are made by the company are affected by it. And it becomes like this trickle-down effect where it affects the people who operate on a fixed income. The perfect example would be digital adoption. Digital adoption was accelerated by people who just got lazy, who wanted the convenience of not having to buy a physical disc, not having to either go to a store or wait for it to be shipped to their house. There are millions of gamers that are now going to be affected by this decision. Millions of gamers who enjoy, owning their games and especially having a physical copy of that game, either to pass on to a future generation, to their kids, whatever, nephews, whatever, what have you, that is now going to go missing because we're about to enter into an era of predominantly digital. This is, without a doubt, the last generation. I think it's going to be the last generation where a disk drive is attached to hardware. There is zero chance that when the PlayStation 6 launches, that the disk drive is attached to the console. I just don't think that's going to happen. I think PlayStation is going to take the risk with PlayStation 6 of releasing one model of the PlayStation 6 that's digital only, and then manufacturing a 1-1 or maybe over 1-1 matchup rate of a disk drive. I think this is definitely the last generation that launches with a disk drive attached to the console. And I think the same thing is going to happen with Xbox. I think they're also going to look into some sort of disk drive add-on solution that PlayStation had come up with. It's just the thing that makes most sense, because as much as these companies, and I think we've heard a lot from Xbox talk about game preservation and the importance of physical, they would want nothing more than for all of us to be playing digital. They really would want nothing more. I think it's indicative of a lot of stuff that we've heard from like Phil Spencer, for example, where Phil Spencer will talk one way, but that at the same time, his decisions, profit-driven decisions, take him in a different direction. We've seen that happen multiple times at Xbox, where they'll say one thing, but then the actions don't really match what they say. I think the same thing goes with physical. I think companies would want nothing more than for us to go digital only at this point. And I think what sucks about it is, once again, it's a decision that was made for people who love physical. Like, you're now being forced into this decision that if you want to continue participating in this entertainment hobby, you have to now get used to not owning your video games. There is really no alternative. And I've seen a lot of people, especially older gamers, people in their 40s, late 30s, that are saying that, oh, when games go digital only, I'm just going to go ahead and just stick to my old library. But even for them, you're going to eventually give in. You will give in at some point. I know for me personally, when the industry goes digital only, I'm going to definitely just fall 100% under PC, because I think PC offers me a better value for digital, because I can shop around. I'm not tied into one ecosystem with something like PlayStation or Xbox, especially PlayStation. I think that's the one weakness that comes about when you talk about something that's digital only. So a lot of people are now talking about, instead of buying a PlayStation 5 Pro, why don't you just build a PC? And this is something I brought up before in the past, where I think if someone came up to me, like my nephew plays video games, but, just like a lot of kids, is into a lot of tablet games, some Nintendo stuff. And I think, like, even for someone like my nephew, if there was ever a question of like, hey, we want to buy him a PlayStation 6 or something like that, or I probably would just say, let's just build him a PC. Because I just think that in terms of gaming, I think there's much more value that you get out of spending more for a PC than buying something that's part of a closed ecosystem like a PlayStation at this point. But it's not really indicative of, this isn't a recommendation for everyone. And a lot of people are telling, like, PlayStation 5 gamers, oh, why buy a Pro when you can just build a PC? Yeah, it's probably because those people are once again tied to an entire ecosystem, starting with PlayStation 4. It's not as easy for them to just build a PC. If you tell them, like, oh, PlayStation 5 games are now coming to PC, why don't you just build a PC? It's not that easy for them, because they have such a large investment into PlayStation that they won't be able to take with them to PC. So it's very understandable why there are those differences. And a lot of people are trying to come forward and trying to build a $700 PS5. It's not going to happen. Digital Foundry claims that the closest you can get is with a 4070, and that GPU by itself is around $500. So to build something even comparable to PlayStation 5, you're probably looking at maybe like $1,300. And that's not even including peripherals, a monitor, keyboard, a mouse, things like that. It's a lot of an investment that goes into it. It's not just that easy. And you'll never be able to replicate the PlayStation 5 Pro, because it has technology that isn't available on the market just yet. So it is one of those things where I don't think it's an alternative for a lot of people, but I think that it is a viable choice going forward. Where I know that for sure, when we think about the next generation with PlayStation 6, unless Xbox really changes their strategy, there is no reason to buy an Xbox. There just isn't. And I think that's going to be consumer behavior going into the next generation, is unless Xbox really changes the way that they do things, there's just no shot of them winning another generation at this point, which is why I've talked about that their strategy is going to change for the next generation. And I think for me, when it comes to the next console generation, I can't see myself not buying a PlayStation 6, to be honest, because I know that there are going to be games that are available on PlayStation 6 that I'm not going to be able to get on PC, and I'm not going to want to wait, right? It's just that simple. If PlayStation announces Last of Us Part 3 launches with PlayStation 6, that is not going to come to PC for a minimum 12 months. And I know for people like me that are huge fans of everything that PlayStation does, you're not going to want to wait. So PlayStation is still going to be able to move consoles going forward. I just feel like as gaming goes more and more digital, then I think that PC becomes the de facto choice because you have access to more storefronts. You have access to an open ecosystem. You don't have to pay for online. You have better flexibility when it comes to gaming, whether that's retro, going into the emulation route and building stuff like that out, or, the fact that for a video game you can add mods. Resident Evil 4, I beat the brakes off that game on PlayStation 5, and eventually I bought it on PC when it went on sale. And look, the PC version is better. And if you ask me, well, Joel, why is the PC version better? It's really the reasoning is mods. Mods just make the game way more fun. It's just kind of fun to do a run through as, dressed up as Link or, with the Wind Waker boat or something like that. Or all the quality of life mods that are added to Resident Evil 4 to make running back through it a lot more fun. Like I have a mod attached where it sort of auto completes all the puzzles because I've done these a million times. I don't want to waste time redoing puzzles. Just get me through the puzzles so I can get back into the game. Or adding all these different modifiers and just fun ways to play the game, whether it's, infinite ammo or whatever, it just makes the game a lot more fun. Or like these cool quality of life mods that they have, like being able to use rifles over the shoulder instead of having to go into a scope. These small things that aren't on the console version. So for me, it's like, the future of gaming, where it's heading for me is really PC. It's not, something like a pro upgrade or something like that. There's just zero shot I'm going to get this. There are only two things that would convince me to buy a PlayStation 5 Pro, because for me, the issue is not money. I have the money to spend on it. I'm usually a very frugal person where I'm like, I'm not going to pay $400 for something that I don't think I'm going to get that much value out of. I only really use my PlayStation when a PlayStation 5 exclusive releases. So I just don't think I'm going to get that much value out of it. There's only two things that would change my mind. Number one is, what does Death Stranding 2 look like on this? We're going to get a look at that game at Tokyo Game Show at the end of the month. I would have to safely assume that they're going to show us what the PS5 Pro version looks like. In terms of, will the full demo be running on PlayStation 5 Pro? I'm sure that that's something that PlayStation would want Kojima to do if it's capable. If it's not there, then that means that they just weren't able to get it up and working in time or something like that. What does that game look like on PlayStation 5 Pro? That will definitely convince me to buy a PS5 Pro because I'm such a huge fan of the first one. The other thing is what a lot of people are waiting for, Grand Theft Auto 6. Now, Digital Foundry believes that based on the specs that they can see for the PlayStation 5 Pro, they believe that it will not be capable of running Grand Theft Auto 6 at 60 frames per second. They claim that this is a CPU problem, not a GPU problem. I'm just going to default to their expertise because I definitely don't know as much as that team in terms of the technicalities of all of this stuff. They claim that they are doubtful. Now, is that a guarantee that it won't run at 60 FPS? No, but they're saying that they're doubtful. Now, this is something I've talked about before, where I guarantee you that PlayStation has already sent a dedicated team to Take-Two and said, look, we're gonna send you this team of 5. They're going to stay with your Rockstar team as long as they need to in order to get you guys running this game at 60 frames per second, because that will be a huge boost to PlayStation 5 Pro, because it will by default be the best place to play it. Now, let's be honest. Even if this game doesn't run at 60 frames per second, PlayStation 5 Pro will still be by default the best place to play Grand Theft Auto 6, because I could see Rockstar at the very least still taking advantage of maybe the ray tracing effects or something like that, or taking advantage of PSSR, even if the game is running at 30 frames per second. So, we'll have to obviously wait and see for that. Mark Cerny also said that the PS5 Pro will allow for high-resolution games on PSVR 2. So if you're one of those users, you can look forward to that. Look, overall, I mean, I understand the issues that people are bringing up with the price. It's one of those things you have to understand that there is no really incentive then for you to buy this, at this point in time. This is a choice. If you have a PlayStation 5, there's still so much room left on that runway. I wonder if this means that PlayStation's gonna break out of the traditional 6 to 7 year cycle. Will we not see a PlayStation 6 until 7, 8 years or something like that? Because I just feel like it feels like this generation has just started at this point in time. The price of the PlayStation 5 has not budged. And if you think about it, the price of the big three has not budged. Nintendo Switch released 7 years ago. It's still $300. Xbox Series X has not seen a price drop. PlayStation 5 has not seen a price drop. These consoles have actually seen price increases in certain parts of the world. PlayStation 5 just raised the price of the DualSense by $5. Prices are going up, they're not going down. I'll be curious to see if they sort of break away from the cycle and just make this like a 7 year. And I just want to end this by quickly talking about the opportunity that Xbox now has. I'm maybe going to work on another video. I talked about working on another future of Xbox video. But I think that this price point for PlayStation 5 Pro and the reaction to this price point presents an opportunity for Xbox. And I've spoken about this before where Xbox has had these opportunities, but usually they're not able to capitalize on them. So I'll usually bring this up, but it doesn't mean that Xbox will execute properly and rise up to the level of this opportunity that's being presented right now. But so we're at this point right now with video games where our entertainment hobby is now becoming more expensive than ever. And this is indicative of a lot of different entertainment. When you think about films, right, the price of movie tickets has gone up. It's not gone down. But I think it's become very different with Xbox, right? Because when you go to a movie theater, with gaming, because when you go to a movie theater, you don't have to buy the theater before you see the movie. It's very different with our industry where in order to get on the rides, right? In order to get on the roller coasters, you have to pay an entrance fee, and that's really what our industry has historically been. And I think for us as gamers, we've sort of just become used to it. We've become used to paying that $4 or $5, now $700 price ticket just to enter the amusement park, and then we're paying for each roller coaster. And this introduces an interesting opportunity for Xbox when it comes to cloud gaming. And I know that this is not something a lot of traditional gamers want to hear about, but the problem right now is that consumers on a fixed income are starting to get left behind. Because now when we talk about introducing a digital future, you're removing the middle class out of it. You're removing people on a fixed income. Because now you're telling them, you have to pay for this console at, next generation is going to be a minimum $500, $600 console, right? You have to pay for that. And now you have to buy games firsthand. There is no secondhand solution to buying video games, right? So there is no eBay. There is no GameStop for you to get games a little bit cheaper. There is no waiting to see if GameFly has it a little bit cheaper. We're at this moment now where if you buy a game on if you buy a PlayStation 5 Digital Edition, how often do you see a sale for a video game compared to something similar for what you would get from a physical version of that same console, right? Going to GameStop, Best Buy, Amazon, seeing all these different sales going on. So by going digital, you're sort of beginning to affect gamers on a fixed income. And I think at that point in time, they're going to start seeking alternatives. And one of the biggest alternatives is actually Game Pass. The fact that you can pay a monthly fee, and let's say that even goes up to $30 a month. That's still a better alternative than having to pay $500-$600 for a console at launch and then $70 per game for a digital copy that you don't even own. Like if I'm not going to own my game, at least I'm going to go for the cheaper solution. And a cloud solution now allows you to access that game from anywhere. This is sort of becoming an opportunity now for Xbox to capitalize on the fact that a lot of people are feeling priced out of this hobby. So think about if Xbox is able to introduce something, and I've brought this up before in the past, where I think that their future really is in software distribution and services, where you're able to buy the Xbox version of a video game. Let's say the next Assassin's Creed comes out. When you buy the Xbox version, you're able to get that really super high res, whatever XSSR version, whatever their DLSS solution is. You're able to access that copy of that game from anywhere, and it runs and it looks really, really good. Xbox saves a lot of money because they have less consoles on the shelf. They're running things through all these bays that they have in different data centers around the world that people are able to access. And when you buy a game from them, you're able to access it from anywhere, and that's on top of a Game Pass subscription. But for something like this to work, they would have to get way more aggressive with access to these types of services. But I think that this introduces a very, very good opportunity for Xbox to now go after the gamers that are going to start seeking value out of video games. I think that right now, gamers are going to be keeping their consoles for a lot longer than they used to. We're seeing it right now with PlayStation 4. Traditionally, a lot of gamers have kept their PlayStation 4 a lot longer than what we saw from PS3 to PS4, because it's just this hobby is becoming extremely, extremely expensive. And what's interesting about the future of video games right now is that we've hit a peak. We've hit a wall of visual fidelity. Like, these games can't get any better looking. And to be honest with you, it's becoming harder and harder to, I think, wow gamers to really drop their jaws for as long as we used to be able to. Even when I played a game like Hellblade 2, which I was like, wow, this is probably the best looking game that I've seen in a long time, it sort of wears away very, very quickly, right? Even with something like Hellblade 2, it's like, wow, look how detailed these rocks are. And it feels like I'm controlling a cutscene almost, kind of thing. And then you play for 5 minutes, or like, I'll be more generous. You play for like 30 minutes, and then the thing that really matters is the gameplay. You're like, wow, this game kind of sucks, man. This thing is kind of boring, man. You know, visuals have hit a wall right now. And I think that consumers are not going to be willing to pay more just for a visual bump. So I think that we might see an extension of this generation. Who knows how long until we say PlayStation 6. I think it's going to be a little bit longer than we've seen in the past. And I think this is the opportunity that Xbox introduces itself. If you sort of put all your eggs into the cloud basket and introduce games that are on the same level as a Microsoft Flight Simulator, which is something that can only work on cloud, you're able to introduce a technology in games that theoretically, unless PlayStation is working on the same thing, you'll be able to build games that are impossible on PlayStation. I think that that's their path going forward. And I think when you look at the reaction to the $700 price point and the fact that traditional gamers are not reacting well to going digital only, they're not happy with it. They're not happy with the pricing. They're not happy with everything going up. You yourself have to ask yourself as a company, how can I give gamers more value? And I think they've done a great job with Game Pass. It's just they have to find an extension to that. This week's hot releases. September 17th, we have Star Wars Jedi Survivor coming to PS4 and Xbox One. Final Fantasy 16 is coming to PC. The Plucky Squire, PC, PS5, Switch, Xbox Series X. It will also be available on PlayStation Plus day one. September 18th, we have UFO 50 coming to PC. September 19th, we have God of War Ragnarok PC. Anotra, The Last Song, coming to PC and PS5. And finally, Dead Rising Deluxe Remaster coming to PC, PS5, and Xbox Series X. Time for us to wrap it up. These are the stories that we didn't have time to get to. Former PlayStation Europe head Chris Deering suggested that developers affected by the recent wave of games industry layoffs should, quote, drive an Uber or, quote, go to the beach for a year while waiting for the industry to resolve its widespread issues. He also added, I don't think it's fair to say that the resulting layoffs have been greed. Of course, it would be heads of companies, CEOs. They are so vastly out of touch with, the regular world that they could tell someone like, oh yeah, it looks like you lost your job. Why don't you just go to the beach for a year or just drive an Uber, deliver some groceries for a little while until the industry gets back on its feet. This is just so astronomically stupid. As a result of the Dr. Disrespect controversy, Dead Drop developers Midnight Society have been forced to cut 50% of its workforce. Now, what I'm about to say sounds a little bit controversial, but I also think that this was merciful. Dr. Disrespect diddling kids was probably a good thing for these developers. And the reason why it's a good thing is because I don't think that there was ever a path to success for Dead Drop. There just wasn't a path to success for this game. I think it was a mistake for them to build it in public. I think they should have built it privately, even if they were using testers. I don't think they should have ever talked or showed off the game. They did it way too early. I remember they started adding a bunch of stupid stuff like, they added like a racetrack so you can drive to the match. It was like such a stupid waste of money that I think that this is probably the best thing that happened to those employees. You're better off leaving now and try to find a place that you can stay at for a while rather than staying here and just losing your job in a few years. Days Gone director John Garvin was not too happy about protagonist Deacon's inclusion in Astrobot. He said, quote, kind of sad that Deke has been reduced to promoting other games. Well done, Ben Studio. Way to protect your legacy. This is a byproduct of being bitter for quite some time. When you become bitter, a sad, bitter man, you look at absolutely everything through a negative lens. When this is something you should be looking at through a positive lens, it means that PlayStation understands that Days Gone is a part of their legacy, even if it isn't like one of their biggest intellectual properties, right? It still was included as part of Astrobot, and pretty much every other important IP in PlayStation's history is in this game. That means that your game was one of them. You should only be complaining if this game was missing from it. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. And finally, Grasshopper manufacturer CEO Suda51 says there's too much attention on Metacritic these days, leading to less unique games. Quote, everybody pays too much attention to and cares too much about Metacritic scores. It's gotten to the point where there's almost a set formula. If you want to get a high Metacritic score, this is how you make the game. I've said this for a while, that review scores have become probably one of the most irresponsible parts of our industry. They add absolutely nothing. They help no one. They actually make our industry worse. But unfortunately, the only way for this to change would be for the big publications to move forward with that change. So until publications like IGN and GameSpot, for example, if their editors were to come together and agree like, hey, I think it's time for us to remove review scores, and both of them do it simultaneously, and hopefully that has a chain effect through the rest of the industry, this will never change. But it is something that absolutely should stop. We should not have review scores anymore. They do absolutely nothing. They don't help anyone. Shout out to Treyarch and Raven Software. The Black Ops 6 beta was the biggest in Call of Duty history. #1 in total number of players, hours played, matches played, and amount of playtime per player. Make sure to subscribe to the Camp Cody podcast on your favorite podcast platform so you can listen to it on the go. And if you already are, please leave us a review. It helps more than you know it. Thank you guys so much for joining me. Please follow us on Twitter and YouTube, Camp Cody, for future updates. Once again, I'm Joel, and I will see you all next week.